Once upon a time, in the heart of a peaceful village, lived a young girl named Amarachi. Amarachi was the pride of her family, their first child, and a true example of kindness and respect. Her family was well loved by everyone in the village, known not for wealth or power, but for their pure hearts and their values. They were contented people, always ready to lend a helping hand. Amarachi's father was a humble man who worked hard to provide, and her mother? Oh, she was a pillar of strength, wisdom, and warmth. Amarachi's mother had a heart big enough to welcome the whole world, and she always taught her children to be kind, to respect others, and to value friendship. No matter how big or small someone may be, she would say, everyone deserves kindness. She would gather her children in the evenings, telling them tales of honesty, love, and the strength of a good heart. Amarachi grew up on these words, and she carried them like treasures in her heart. Being the first child, she felt a sense of responsibility to guide her younger siblings, to be a role model. In the village, everyone knew Amarachi's family, not because they had riches, but because they had values. They were the kind of family that shared their food with neighbors and never turned away someone in need. Amarachi's mother was always welcoming, even when things were tight at home. She had a way of making people feel safe and loved, and Amarachi learned this grace from her mother. Amarachi would often go with her mother to visit old friends or help those who were struggling. They had a bond as mother and daughter, a bond that felt like an unbreakable thread spun from love and trust. And Amarachi, well, she was her mother's daughter through and through. She was gentle, always ready with a smile, and everyone in the village adored her. She had one best friend, Chinyere, whom she cherished like a sister. They had been close since they were little, sharing secrets, dreams, and laughter. It was said that if you saw Amarachi, you would surely see Chinyere close by. They were inseparable, like the sun and its shadow, each bringing out the best in the other. Amarachi and Chinyere were the kind of friends who could finish each other's sentences, always knowing what the other was thinking. They were more than friends. They were like sisters, bound by love, loyalty, and countless memories. Both of them attended Omoli Grammar School and were in the same class, SSS 3A. Amarachi was a bright student, always paying attention in class and aiming to make her family proud. And Chinyere? She was right by her side, sharing notes, stories, and dreams. The two girls were inseparable. They would eat together, laugh together, and support each other in every way. During break time, you could always find them sitting under the big mango tree, sharing snacks and discussing the future. If Amarachi brought rice, Chinyere would bring akara, and they would split their food right down the middle. They were admired by everyone in the village, who saw their friendship as something pure and precious, a bond that seemed unbreakable. One day, something happened that showed just how close they were. Amarachi's little sister, Ada, was playing around the school compound when Emeka, a boy in their class, tried to bully her. Emeka was a bit of a troublemaker, and he didn't think twice before trying to scare younger kids. But he made one mistake. He picked on Ada while her big sister and Chinyere were nearby. Amarachi noticed first. "Hey, Emeka, leave my sister alone," she shouted, stepping forward with fire in her eyes. But Emeka just laughed and ignored her, pushing little Ada around. That was all Chinyere needed to see. Without a second thought, she joined Amarachi, and together, they faced Emeka, standing strong like a wall. The two of them didn't let him off easily. They gave him a piece of their minds and chased him away. From that day, everyone at school knew better than to mess with Amarachi's family or Chinyere's loyalty. They were a force to be reckoned with, a true duo that would stand together no matter what. Time passed quickly, and soon enough, the biggest test of their lives was just around the corner, the WAC exams. Chinyere's family lived a humble life. Her father, a poor farmer, worked tirelessly in the sun and rain, tending to his small plot of land. Despite his hard work, he barely earned enough to feed the family. And when it came time to pay for Chinyere's West Africa Examination Council, WAC fees, he found himself in a bind. He had hoped to rely on Chief Amadi, a wealthy man in the village, who had promised payment for the hours Chinyere's father had spent toiling on his farm. But when he went to collect his earnings, Chief Amadi brushed him off with empty promises. Desperate, Chinyere's father ran from one end of the village to the other, pleading for help, but every door seemed to be closed. The disappointment weighed heavily on him, knowing that this exam was Chinyere's only ticket to a brighter future, a chance for her to rise above the poverty they had always known. Chinyere herself was heartbroken. She watched her friends preparing for the exams with excitement, while her own dreams of graduating slipped further and further away. The thought of not standing alongside Amarachi and her other classmates on graduation day left her feeling moody, withdrawn, and hopeless. Amarachi noticed her friend's sadness. She could see the worry in Chinyere's eyes, the way her shoulders drooped, and the once bright smile that had faded into silence. Amarachi felt her heart ache for her friend. Without telling anyone, she decided to do something about it. Each day, she saved a bit of her lunch money, even skipping her snacks, determined to gather enough to help Chinyere. After 2 long weeks of saving, Amarachi finally had enough to combine with what Chinyere's father managed to gather. The day she handed the money to Chinyere, tears filled Chinyere's eyes. She hugged Amarachi tightly, unable to find words to thank her friend for such a kind gesture. And so, against all odds, Chinyere was able to sit for the WAC exams, standing proudly with her friend, Amarachi, as they prepared to leave secondary school with flying colors. Their bond had grown stronger than ever, built on trust, sacrifice, and the knowledge that true friends always stand by each other. Months had passed since Amarachi and Chinyere graduated from secondary school, but life had changed drastically for Amarachi. Her world came crashing down when her father was involved in a terrible accident, which left him paralyzed and bound to a wheelchair. The family's once strong anchor was now struggling, unable to work or support them like he used to. Her father had spent all his savings on medical bills, even selling one of his precious pieces of land to cover the hospital costs. With her father's condition, Amarachi knew she had to step up. She took up small jobs around the village, helping neighbors with errands, sweeping compounds, and anything she could find to earn a little money. She worked tirelessly, splitting her time between helping her mother care for her younger siblings and trying to save for her own university education. Despite everything, she was determined to keep her dreams alive. Slowly, Amarachi managed to save 15,000 naira, enough to buy a jam form for her university admission. But then, just when things were beginning to look up, her younger brother Chinedu fell seriously ill. Her mother had nothing left, having spent every last naira on her husband's medicine. Amarachi didn't think twice. She used her jam savings to rush Chinedu to the hospital and buy the medicine he needed. On the other side, Chinyere's family was struggling too. They barely had enough to make ends meet, but Chinyere had a dream of supporting her family, just like Amarachi. Then, one day, a glimmer of hope appeared. Chinyere found a connection in the city, a job opportunity as a cleaner. It wasn't much, but it was a chance to earn and start a new chapter. Chinyere didn't keep it to herself. She shared the news with Amarachi, excitement mixed with uncertainty. The two friends talked about the idea, weighing the risks and the hopes they carried. After many conversations with their families, who knew just how hard life had been, everyone agreed that this might be the best step for them. And so, with heavy hearts but hopeful spirits, Amarachi and Chinyere packed their few belongings, hugged their families tightly, and set off for the city, ready to face whatever awaited them in this new world. Arriving in Lagos was like stepping into another world for Amarachi and Chinyere. The city buzzed with life, loud, busy, and fast, with people moving like they were in a hurry to chase something only they could see. The girls had never seen so many lights, cars, and tall buildings before. It was both exciting and overwhelming, but they had each other, and that made all the difference. Their agent, Mr. Ade, was a big help. He connected them to a cleaning job at Quilox, one of the city's popular clubs. He told them, Lagos life no be like Village O. Here, people day do anyhow. Just stay focused, do your work well, and you go see small change. He even helped them buy food, pointing out where they could find cheap but filling meals. Amarachi looked at Chinyere one day after work, wiping sweat from her forehead. City life no be beans, my sister. This work day hard, but at least we day earn small something. Chinyere laughed, hands on her hips. You no lie. But if not this small cleaning job go, help us save. Then I go clean like say now my papa, get this whole club. They both burst into laughter, finding comfort in each other's words. Every night, they scrubbed floors, wiped tables, and swept every corner, making sure Quillox was spotless before the crowd came in. They were diligent and hardworking, making sure they did their best, even if it meant bending their backs for hours. But then came this particular client, a man who seemed to have only one goal: to make their work harder. He was always in a shiny, flashy suit, with rings on almost every finger. Whenever they cleaned his spot, he would litter it again: cigarette butts, pieces of paper, empty bottles, almost like he was testing their patience. One night, as they finished cleaning near his table, Amarachi sighed, finally, we done clean everywhere. Just as they turned to leave, he called out, "Hey, you two, come back here." Amarachi and Chinyere turned to see him pointing at the floor under his table. Chinyere whispered to Amarachi, "No be where we just clean be this? Wouldn't they worry this man?" Amarachi nudged her. "Just ignore Am, let's do the work. Maybe you go tire." But the man wasn't done. The moment they finished cleaning again, he would toss something else on the floor, giving them that smug look, almost daring them to speak up. Amarachi clenched her fist, feeling frustration bubbling up. She whispered to Chinyere, "If to say I fit talk my mind, I foretell this man something way go make him head scatter." Chinyere chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Amarachi, "No go let this man make you talk something way go carry us back to the village. Oh, just remember why we day here." Amarachi took a deep breath, trying to hold back her words. "You day right. But honestly, this man no get respect for person work. If he no like clean place, make him go outside." Chinyere glanced at him, her eyes flashing with a bit of mischief. "Make we day watch Am. One day, this man go try this nonsense with person way no be like us. He go here, Am." They shared a small smile, determined not to let him ruin their focus. But as they moved to the next area, they knew he was watching them, and they wondered just how long they could keep their cool in the face of his taunts. Amarachi's dedication and relentless hard work soon caught the eyes of both the club management and some influential patrons. Her work ethic shone brightly in a place where people rarely noticed the cleaners. The club's manager, a well-respected woman named Madame Titi, was the first to acknowledge her efforts. "Amarachi, come to my office," Madame Titi said one evening, looking at her over the rim of her glasses. Amarachi's heart skipped. She wondered if she'd done something wrong, but Madame Titi's voice was warm. As she entered the office, Madame Titi smiled. "We've noticed your work around here. You're diligent and respectful. Not many people come to this city and work this hard without complaint." She handed Amarachi an envelope. "A little bonus for your effort. Keep it up, and we might have more responsibilities for you soon." Amarachi's hands trembled as she took the envelope, her voice shaking with gratitude. "Thank you, madam. I really appreciate it." As the weeks went by, small bonuses became regular, and before long, Madame Titi offered Amarachi a small promotion, giving her the responsibility of overseeing other junior cleaners. It wasn't much, but in a city like Lagos, every little bit counted. But while Amarachi's star was rising, Chinyere felt something else. At first, she was happy for her friend, but slowly, jealousy began to creep in. Why wasn't she getting the same recognition? After all, they'd come to the city together, worked side by side, and shared dreams. Yet, while Amarachi was praised, Chinyere often felt ignored, just another face in the crowd. One day, Chinyere overheard two workers talking in the break room. "That Amarachi girl, she's going places." Madame Titi even called her manager material. "Can you imagine?" one of them said, laughing. Chinyere clenched her fists, feeling bitterness rise in her throat. Why was Amarachi getting all the attention? Did they not see her hard work, too? Then, one fateful evening, Amarachi received a call from home. Her father was critically ill. She barely had time to pack her things, her heart racing as she rushed to the village. Every second counted, and she knew her family needed her. She only had enough time to scribble a quick letter to Madame Titi, explaining her absence, and handed it to Chinyere. "Chinyere, please submit this letter to Madame Titi. Tell her I had to rush back home because of an emergency." Chinyere nodded, taking the letter, but her expression was hard to read. Days passed, and Amarachi's struggles only deepened. At the hospital in her village, she realized how serious her father's condition was. Medical bills piled up fast. After spending everything she had, she was still short. Desperate, she called Chinyere for help. "Chinyere, please, I beg you. I need 30,000 naira to help my father. I'll pay you back as soon as I can," Amarachi pleaded, her voice heavy with worry. But Chinyere hesitated, her tone colder than usual. Amarachi, I don't have that kind of money right now. Things are tight. You understand?" That very night, Chinyere transferred 45,000 naira to her boyfriend, helping him pay for an online course he'd been wanting to take. Amarachi, stranded and out of options, could only watch as her father's health worsened. In the end, he slipped away, leaving Amarachi and her family in grief. Back in Lagos, days turned into weeks. Chinyere hadn't submitted the letter as Amarachi had asked. Instead, she allowed Madam TT and the rest of the management to believe Amarachi had simply abandoned her post without notice. Rumors started swirling. Some said Amarachi had left for a better-paying job, others that she had been caught in trouble. Chinyere watched, saying nothing, letting Amarachi's name fall from the manager's good graces. And there, while Amarachi grieved and gathered strength to return, Chinyere stayed in her place, silently sowing seeds that could turn her friend's world upside down when she finally returned. When Amarachi finally returned to Lagos, weary and heartbroken over her father's death, her mind was set on resuming her job. She needed to move forward, both for herself and for her family. But as she stepped into the club, expecting to meet familiar faces and get back into the rhythm of work, she was met instead with a terrifying sight. Two stern-faced police officers waiting for her. "Amarachi, I'll attend Amarachi," one of the officers asked, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Yes, that's me, officer. Is something wrong?" Amarachi's voice shook, a creeping sense of dread settling over her. Without a word, the officer grabbed her wrist and cuffed her hands tightly. "You're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement," he said coldly, reading her rights as shocked staff members watched in stunned silence. Amarachi's heart pounded, her head spinning. "Officer, I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong. I don't know anything about this." But the officers ignored her pleas, dragging her out as Madam TT, her former mentor, shook her head with a look of disappointment. "After everything we did for you, Amarachi," Madam TT muttered, her tone filled with hurt. Amarachi barely heard her. The words stung like sharp cuts. She was escorted to a cell, the metal bars cold and unforgiving. As she sat on the hard bench, trying to make sense of the nightmare she found herself in, a familiar face appeared before her. Chinyere. "Amarachi," Chinyere called softly, feigning concern as she peered through the bars. Amarachi's eyes filled with tears. "Chinyere, please tell them I would never steal from the company. You know me better than anyone." Chinyere crossed her arms, tilting her head as she looked at Amarachi with a calculating gaze. There was a strange glint in her eye, something cold and unreadable. "Amarachi, just tell me the truth, please," she whispered, her voice soft but sharp. "Did you do it? Did you steal that money? If you did, you know I won't tell anyone. I'm your best friend." Amarachi's face crumpled in disbelief, the weight of her friend's words hitting her like a punch. Her best friend, her sister in spirit, was asking if she was a thief. Her chest tightened as she searched Chinyere's face, desperate to find any trace of the friend she once knew. "Chinyere, how can you even ask me that?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I would never betray anyone, especially not you. You know that." Chinyere just shrugged, her face hardening into a mask of indifference. "I just wanted to be sure, Amarachi. You've changed, and people do strange things when they're desperate." With those parting words, Chinyere turned and walked away, leaving Amarachi alone in the cold, dark cell, wondering how everything in her life had crumbled so quickly and wondering if her only true friend was behind it all. Months passed, and the heavy shadow of the scandal hung over Amarachi. Her world had been shattered, not just by the betrayal of her own best friend, but by the cold indifference of the world around her. She spent countless days in the prison cell, each moment feeling longer than the last. Yet, deep down, Amarachi held on to one hope. The truth would eventually come to light. And it did, but at a cost she never imagined. One day, word reached Amarachi that she was being bailed out by a generous NGO. She was freed, but she didn't feel liberated. She was a broken soul, her spirit shattered, like glass strewn across the ground. The world outside felt distant. And when she returned to her village, she realized the depth of the betrayal she had suffered. Months passed after her release, and news from Lagos reached her. The truth about the fraudulent transactions came out, but not in the way Amarachi expected. It wasn't that she was exonerated right away, but with time, evidence of Chinyere's role in the scheme began to surface. Chinyere had conspired with the cashier to backdate the transactions to make it look like Amarachi was the one embezzling the company funds. The CEO, who had once praised Amarachi for her hard work and leadership potential, had secretly been planning to send her abroad to further her education in the United States, a scholarship that would have set Amarachi up for a brighter future. But Chinyere, once the supportive friend, had overheard this plan. She had been jealous of Amarachi's success and recognition, feeling overshadowed by her friend's potential and accomplishments. In her desperation, Chinyere had decided that she couldn't stand to see Amarachi rise higher while she felt stuck in the same place. So, she plotted against her, framing her for a crime Amarachi didn't commit, knowing it would tear her down and keep her in a place of stagnation. The scholarship, the opportunity of a lifetime, was now lost to Amarachi, and it was taken away by the hands of the one person she trusted most, her best friend. Instead of Amarachi receiving the life-changing opportunity, Chinyere was the one who was promoted in the company. She took Amarachi's position, enjoying the rewards of her treachery. The CEO, not knowing the full extent of Chinyere's jealousy and manipulation, was quick to give Chinyere the recognition she wanted. She was sent abroad, awarded the scholarship that had once been destined for Amarachi. She smiled for the cameras, posing with excitement as if she had earned it all, unaware that the entire time she had been carrying out a betrayal so deep that even she would one day feel the weight of her actions. Meanwhile, Amarachi was left behind, trying to piece together the shattered remnants of her life. The pain of her father's death, the struggle to help her family, and the deceit of her closest friend were all too much for her to bear. Hopelessness weighed heavily on her heart as she watched her best friend leave for the United States, knowing that everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, was taken away in the most painful way. Chinyere, now living her dream abroad, would continue to rise, all the while ignorant of the quiet storm she had created. For Amarachi, the pain of betrayal lingered, and the question echoed in her heart. Could she ever trust again? Would there be a chance for her to rebuild? Or was she destined to be a shadow of the dream she once had? Her journey was far from over, but for now, all Amarachi could do was watch from the sidelines, as the world she once had a place in moved on without her. The scholarship that was meant for her, the bright future that had been ripped away, had left her standing alone in the dust, waiting for a chance to reclaim the life she had lost. Back in the village, I hope you enjoyed. The weight of Amarachi's struggles didn't just affect her. It seeped into the very fabric of her family. Her mother, who had always been the pillar of strength for the household, was now crumbling under the pressure of worry and heartbreak. Her blood pressure rose as her mind was constantly laced with thoughts about Amarachi's shattered dreams, the family's survival, and what the future held for her children. Amarachi, despite her own pain, couldn't afford to give in to despair. She had to stay back in the village to support her mother. Her days were filled with hard labor, working tirelessly on other people's farms just to scrape together enough money for her mother's treatment and to keep the household afloat. The once bright and determined girl who dreamt of a better life was now bending under the harsh reality of survival, but her spirit remained unbroken. After weeks of care and sacrifice, Amarachi's mother began to recover, and with her newfound strength, she gathered Amarachi and her younger sister, Ada, one evening under the moonlit sky. Sitting together in their small compound, she shared tales filled with wisdom and lessons learned from her own life. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of experience and love. My children, she began, her eyes glistening with both pain and hope, this world can be unfair and full of people who will hurt you, but you must never let their actions define you. A good name, my daughters, is better than silver and gold. When you keep your hands clean and your heart pure, no matter how hard life gets, your purpose will find you. She turned to Amarachi, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. Amara, I know what Chinyere did to you was painful, but never let bitterness take root in your heart. God's time is the best time, and what is meant for you will come back to you. Amarachi nodded, fighting back tears, her mother's words sinking deep into her heart. Her mother's resilience became a source of strength for her, and even though the journey ahead seemed bleak, she found a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, Chinyere's father, who had heard of all that had transpired, took a different view of the situation. To him, Chinyere's actions were not betrayal but bravery. He saw his daughter's move as a bold step in securing her future in a world that favored the strong and cunning. That girl had to fight for herself, he told anyone who cared to listen. The world doesn't reward the weak. Amarachi should have been smarter. His words spread through the village, creating a divide among the people. While some sided with Amarachi, sympathizing with her loss and pain, others whispered that perhaps she had been too trusting, too naive. The betrayal became a topic of endless discussion, and Amarachi's once spotless reputation now bore the weight of unfounded doubts. As days turned into weeks, Amarachi remained focused on helping her family survive, her mother's tales of perseverance and moral fortitude becoming her guiding light. But in her quiet moments, she couldn't help but wonder, would life ever give her the chance to rise again? Amarachi woke up one early morning, her mind made up. She couldn't let her dreams end in the village. The city was tough, but it held the promise of hope, of a second chance. She looked at her mother and said, "Mama, I want to go back to Lagos and try again." Her mother paused, worry lining her face. "Amara, Lagos no be small place. Are you sure?" Amarachi nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Mama, I cannot give up like this. I will make it. For you, for Ada, and for all of us." But the problem was money. She didn't have a kobo to her name. So, she picked up her hoe and cutlass, heading back to the farm. Day after day, she worked under the scorching sun, planting, weeding, and harvesting for anyone willing to pay her. The soil became her partner in this new hustle, and every naira she earned was like a step closer to her dream. After weeks of hard work, she finally raised 40,000 naira, just enough for the trip and a little extra for food when she arrived. She packed her few belongings into a bag and prepared to leave. On the morning of her departure, Amarachi's mother woke up early and cooked yam and stew for her. She sat her down and held her hands tightly. "My child," her mother began, her voice steady, "you are going back into the world. Remember everything I've taught you. Work hard, stay honest, and trust God. No matter how hard it gets, don't lose hope." Amarachi nodded, her heart swelling with love. Her mother placed her hand on her head and prayed, blessing every step her daughter would take. When the prayer ended, Amarachi stood up, hugged her mother, and said goodbye to Ada. With her bag on her head and hope in her heart, she began her journey back to Lagos. When Amarachi arrived in Lagos after the long, tiring journey, the city greeted her with its usual noise and chaos. But this time, there was no excitement in her heart, only the relief of being back. She made her way to her rented room, pulling her bag behind her, eager to rest and plan her next move. When she reached the compound, the place looked different, quieter, almost unfamiliar. She knocked on her door, but it didn't open. Confused, she knocked again, harder this time. "Who dey there?" a man's voice called from inside. Amarachi stepped back, confused. "Sorry, this is my room," she said. The door creaked open, and a tall, angry-looking man stood there. "Your room? Namide live here now. Who you be?" Before Amarachi could reply, the landlord, Mr. Tund, walked into the scene, his hands tucked behind his back. "Amarachi," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You didn't pay your rent. It expired 2 months ago, and I rented the room to someone else. The words hit her like a slap. She blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. But my things are inside, she stammered, her voice shaky. Mr. Tun nodded toward a corner of the compound. Your load is there, he said casually, pointing to a small pile of bags and boxes covered with a torn tarpaulin. Amarachi's heart sank. The little she had left in this world was now dumped outside like trash. She stood there, stranded with nowhere to go, her bag still in her hand and tears welling in her eyes. Amarachi sat by the pile of her belongings, her knees pulled to her chest, staring into space. Hours passed, but to her it felt like one long, endless day. Her thoughts swirled, her mother's prayers, her dreams, the struggles that seemed to follow her like a shadow. Finally, she shook herself awake, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and whispered, Amara, you didn't come back to Lagos to cry. You came to hustle. She looked around the compound, her eyes falling on an uncompleted building just behind it. The structure looked abandoned, with no doors or windows, but at least it had a roof. It wasn't much, but it would be her shelter for now. She picked up her bags and moved in, arranging her things neatly in a corner. The next morning, Amarachi woke up early. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She began her search for a job, walking from one street to another, knocking on doors and entering shops. When there were no responses or places to apply, she offered to do menial work for neighbors. She washed clothes, swept houses, and even fetched water, earning small amounts to keep herself fed. But the money was barely enough, and each passing day left her more exhausted. One afternoon, she approached a restaurant with a staff wanted sign hanging on the door. Her heart lifted as she entered, but the manager's first words were, Sorry, no space for females right now. We only need male staff. Amarachi's shoulders sagged as she thanked him and walked out. The rejections were starting to feel personal, and her hope was shrinking. As she walked back to the uncompleted building, her feet dragging on the pavement, she heard a familiar voice call out, Amara? Is that you? She turned and saw a bright smile beaming at her. It was Amaka, her former classmate from Omoli Grammar School. Amaka looked different now, confident and well-dressed, with a bag slung over her shoulder and a spring in her step. Amaka! Amarachi exclaimed, forcing a smile as she wiped the sweat from her brow. The two embraced, and Amaka held her at arm's length, studying her face. Ah, Amarachi, long time oh. Look at you. What are you doing in Lagos? It's a long story, Amarachi replied with a weak laugh. How about you? You look good. My dear, Lagos no easy but God has been faithful, Amaka said, smiling brightly. Where are you staying? Are you working? Amarachi hesitated, unsure of how much to say. Well, it's a bit complicated. Amaka frowned slightly, her expression turning serious. Amarachi, you can tell me, what's going on? As they stood by the roadside, the sun beginning to set behind them, Amarachi sat on the edge of the small mattress in Amaka's cramped one-room apartment, her heart heavy as she finished narrating her story. Amaka sat beside her, shaking her head slowly. Amarachi, you've been through too much, she said, her voice soft with pity. This Lagos no day smile but don't worry. You can stay here with me for now. Thank you, Amaka, Amarachi replied, her voice trembling with gratitude. I'll never forget this kindness. The next morning, after a quick breakfast of bread and tea, Amaka sat Amarachi down for a talk. My sister, let me tell you the truth, she began. Life in Lagos no easy. The way I day survive, no be for everybody. Amarachi tilted her head curiously. What do you do? Amaka sighed and looked away for a moment before speaking. I work in a nightclub. My hustle is mostly at night. She hesitated before adding, I satisfy my clients in kind. Amarachi's eyes widened in shock. Amaka, you mean? Yes, Amaka said bluntly. I no go lie give you. It's not what I planned for my life, but hunger no day wait for dreams. It's the only way I fit survive. Amaka, Amarachi began cautiously. I understand that life is hard, but this isn't the only way. You're smart, and you're beautiful. You can find something better. Better? Amaka cut in, her tone sharp. Where is the better work, Amarachi? Did it find you? Lagos is a jungle, my sister. If you know strong, egos swallow you. Amarachi sighed, but said no more. She understood the pain behind Amaka's words but couldn't agree with her choices. Despite their differences, Amaka was kind. She took care of Amarachi, sharing her food and even giving her money for small personal items. I may not live the life you like, Amaka said one evening, but as long as you're under my roof, I'll make sure you're okay. A week later, Amaka returned home with a piece of good news. Amarachi, I found something for you, she said excitedly. There's an opening for a cook at Ibis Hotel in Ikeja. I know you sabi cook well. I told the manager about you, and he agreed to give you an interview. Amarachi's face lit up for the first time in weeks. Amaka, God bless you. I don't even know how to thank you. Thank me by nailing that interview, Amaka said with a wink. The day of the interview arrived, and Amarachi, dressed in the only neat outfit she had, made her way to Ibis Hotel. Her heart pounded as she entered the sleek building, the polished floors and cool air conditioning a sharp contrast to her humble beginnings. As she sat in the waiting area, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, she whispered a prayer. God, let this be my chance. Meanwhile, back at Quilox, murmurs began to spread among the staff about what truly happened to Amarachi. Some employees whispered that Chinyere had conspired to get her sacked. The rumors reached the manager, Mrs. Esther, who frowned deeply as she listened. I don't tolerate injustice in my establishment, Mrs. Esther said firmly during a staff meeting. I'll set up a team to investigate these claims. If there's any truth to this, there will be serious consequences. Unaware of the brewing storm, Chinyere was miles away, enjoying the benefits of the scholarship that Amarachi had once been promised. She sat in a prestigious university, surrounded by books and opportunities, oblivious to the whispers of truth slowly catching up to her. Back in Ikeja, Amarachi nervously approached the reception desk at Ibis Hotel after her interview. She had given it her best, both the oral and practical tests. The chef had been impressed with her skill and her knowledge of traditional and continental dishes. You've got the job, the HR officer said with a smile, handing her a folder with her offer letter. Welcome to Ibis Hotel as our new assistant head chef. Amarachi's eyes filled with tears of relief. Thank you, sir. I promise to give my best. Later that evening, Amarachi rushed home to share the news with Amaka. She burst into the small room, a wide smile on her face. Amaka, I got the job, Amarachi exclaimed, almost jumping with excitement. Amaka dropped the plate she was washing and turned to her, grinning. My sister, tell me everything. How was the interview? Amarachi sat down, still beaming. It wasn't easy, but I did it. They asked me to prepare egusi soup and jollof rice. And you know how much I love cooking. I poured my heart into it. And the chef even said, You remind me of my mother. Amaka laughed and hugged her. You deserve it, Amarachi. God is really working for you. Amarachi nodded, her smile tinged with gratitude. This is my second chance, Amaka. I won't waste it. Back at Quilox, Chinyere began to feel the heat. The manager's investigation was no longer a rumor. It was real. Panic crept in as she remembered the person who had helped her backdate the transaction. Without wasting time, Chinyere reached out to him. Remember what we did that day, she said over the phone, her voice low and urgent. Don't forget you're as involved as I am. If this gets out, it won't be good for either of us. Keep quiet and take this money. She made plans to send a bribe while preparing a backup plan to blackmail him if he refused. The weight of her actions began to press heavily, but her fear of being exposed was even greater. Meanwhile, Amarachi woke up before dawn. As the soft light of morning seeped through the window, she knelt to pray, then got ready for her first day at Ibis Hotel. But as she reached for her purse, reality struck. She had no money for transport. Her face fell, and she sat back on the bed, staring into space. Amaka noticed and walked over, concern etched on her face. What's wrong, Amarachi? Amaka asked, sitting beside her. I don't even have money for transport, Amarachi said, her voice heavy with embarrassment. Amaka smiled gently, went to her bag, and handed Amarachi some money. Take this. It's enough for transport and lunch. Don't worry, okay? Amarachi's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Amaka, thank you so much. I'll pay you back. No need, Amaka said with a shrug. Just go and shine today. I know you'll do well. Amarachi's first day at work was nothing short of remarkable. She worked with dedication, her movements in the kitchen precise and confident. By the end of the day, her supervisor approached her with a smile. Amarachi, you've done well today, he said. I can see why they hired you. Keep it up. The words filled her heart with pride, and she couldn't wait to share the news with Amaka. Later that evening, Amarachi returned home to find Amaka in a cheerful mood. They sat together, laughing and talking. Amaka teased Amarachi about how she would soon become a top chef in Lagos. One thing led to another, and the conversation took a serious turn. Amaka's laughter faded, replaced by a distant look in her eyes. Amarachi, she began softly, do you know why I do the kind of work I do? Amarachi shook her head, surprised by the sudden change in tone. Why? She asked gently. Amaka sighed deeply. I was trafficked when I was just 16. It was right after my WAC exams. They promised me a good job in Lagos. I was so excited, thinking I would help my family and build a better life. Her voice trembled as she continued. But when I got here, it wasn't a job waiting for me. It was a nightmare. I was forced into this life, Amarachi, and now I can't leave. They gave me a target to meet before I can gain my freedom. Mrs. Damilola's men are always watching me, making sure I don't try to escape. Amarachi stared at her friend, her heart breaking for her. Amaka, this is terrible. You don't deserve this. Amaka forced a weak smile. It's my reality, Amarachi. But I pray every day that one day I'll be free. The next day at work, Amarachi arrived early as usual, ready to dive into her duties in the kitchen. But just as she was tying her apron, her supervisor walked in. Amarachi, he called, we have a situation. The waitress on duty today called in sick. I need you to fill in for her, just for today. Amarachi's heart skipped a beat. Me? Serve customers? Yes, Amarachi, the supervisor replied, smiling. You're smart and presentable. I know you can handle it. With some hesitation, Amarachi agreed. Soon, she found herself in the dining area, carefully balancing trays and taking orders with a polite smile. As she approached a table with a glass of juice, a well-dressed man seated nearby looked up sharply. His gaze lingered on her, and he called out softly, Excuse me, miss. Amarachi turned to him. Yes, sir? How may I help you? The man studied her face, his eyes widening in recognition. Are you Amarachi? He asked, leaning forward. Amarachi blinked in surprise. Yes, I am. How do you know my name? Amarachi, the man said, his voice filled with emotion. You look exactly like your father. Is your father Mr. Okachukwu? Amarachi's breath caught. Yes, that's my father. But how do you know him? The man smiled, his eyes glistening. Your father helped me years ago when I was homeless in Abuja. He gave me a place to stay and found me a job in his workshop. I've been searching for him ever since, wanting to thank him properly. Tears welled up in Amarachi's eyes. My father passed away recently, she said softly. The man's face fell. I'm so sorry to hear that. He was a great man. And now, seeing you, I know the kindness he showed me runs in the family. He reached into his pocket and handed her his card. Here, please call me. I want to help you in any way I can. It's the least I can do to honor your father. Amarachi accepted the card, her hands trembling. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Meanwhile, back in the USA, Chinyere's perfect life began to crumble. Rumors of her involvement in Amarachi's downfall had reached the CEO's ears, prompting a deeper investigation. The conversation she had with the cashier years ago, the one where they conspired against Amarachi, had been secretly recorded and was now in the hands of the management. Chinyere was summoned for questioning. When confronted with the evidence, she tried to deny it, but the recording was undeniable. You are hereby stripped of all benefits, the stern voice of the CEO declared. Your scholarship is revoked. You will be sent back to Nigeria to face the consequences of your actions. Chinyere returned to Nigeria in disgrace. Upon her arrival, She was immediately arrested and jailed for fraud and conspiracy. While Chinyere sat in a cell, grappling with the fallout of her betrayal, Amarachi held onto the business card she had received, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long time. Amarachi clutched the card in her hand, her heart pounding as she arrived at the tall glass building. The man who had recognized her at the hotel greeted her warmly in his office. "Amarachi, sit down," he said with a smile. "I've been waiting for you." They talked for hours, Amarachi recounting her struggles and dreams. The man listened attentively before asking, "What do you want to do, Amarachi? If you could start fresh, what would you pursue?" Amarachi hesitated, then said, "I want to build something meaningful, a business that helps people, especially women like me who have faced hardship." The man smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." Years passed, and Amarachi transformed her life. With the man's support, she grew into a successful businesswoman, known for her resilience and generosity. Her story became an inspiration to many. One of Amarachi's first missions was to help Amaka. She carefully orchestrated Amaka's escape from Mrs. Damilola's clutches, ensuring her freedom. Amarachi went on to set up a thriving business for Amaka, giving her a second chance at life. Meanwhile, back in Chinyere's family home, her father, once proud and boastful, was now a shadow of his former self. The weight of shame bore down on him as news of Chinyere's downfall spread. Unable to bear it any longer, he swallowed his pride and visited Amarachi's mother. "Please," he begged, tears in his eyes. "Talk to your daughter. Beg her to help Chinyere. She's all I have." Amarachi's mother listened quietly, her heart heavy. She knew the pain of loss and betrayal, but also the strength of forgiveness. Amarachi was later approached by Quillock's management, who offered her a substantial compensation package and a prestigious position as an apology for the injustice she had suffered. But Amarachi, her heart filled with grace, declined the offer. "I don't need money or titles," she said. "All I wanted was justice, and I have found my peace. I forgive you." After much reflection, Amarachi also decided to forgive Chinyere. She visited the authorities and requested Chinyere's release. However, when Chinyere's father approached her, pleading for her to reconnect with his daughter, Amarachi remained firm. "I forgive her," she said calmly, "but my chapter with her is closed. I wish her well, but I cannot walk that path with her anymore." As Amarachi left the prison gates, she felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She had risen above betrayal, transformed pain into purpose, and reclaimed her life. Her journey of forgiveness had not only freed Chinyere, but also freed her own heart. Amarachi stood outside her bustling business complex, watching the sunrise. The golden light bathed her face, a symbol of hope and renewal. She thought back on her journey, the betrayal, the struggles, and the countless tears. Yet, here she stood, stronger, wiser, and filled with gratitude. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "A good name is better than riches, Amarachi. Always let your actions bring light to the world." Amarachi smiled. She had stayed true to those words, and they had guided her through the darkest days. As she walked back inside, she saw Amaka managing her store, a bright smile on her face. Amarachi had not only rebuilt her life, but had helped others find theirs. Her story was a reminder that resilience, kindness, and forgiveness can turn any hardship into triumph. Moral lessons. Life's challenges are not the end, but an opportunity to rise stronger. Never give up. Betrayal and hurt may come from those closest to you, but forgiveness sets you free. Helping others on your journey enriches your own life. A good name truly lasts longer than wealth. Always choose integrity, no matter the circumstance. Truth and kindness pave the way for success. Amarachi's story teaches us that every setback can be a setup for a remarkable comeback. What are your thoughts on this journey of resilience, forgiveness, and redemption? Have you ever faced a situation that tested your patience and strength? Share your thoughts and lessons in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Tales by Foxy, and share this story with someone who might need encouragement today. Let's spread hope and inspiration together.
my life